Levin, Sunday, June 26, 2022. Happy Pride Day. I was in New York City for the first time in quite a long time, at least Manhattan, that is. I parked in Staten Island, drove close to the ferry station, and took the ferry over with my kid and took in Pride Day. It was a wonderful success, a wonderful time. And wow, so much, right? First, engage. Don't be a quitter. There is a great unstoppable you. There's a you that is most aligned to both the vibe you were given by chance at conception when you were just one sequence of information. And then there's the vibe that you've layered on over first cell division, bifurcation, and then later through meta processes of taking control of the reins of your own life. Picking yourself up by your own bootstraps. One of the greatest expressions of all time, which is, of course, an impossible thing to do. It's a wonderful image for cartoons where you reach down to the straps on the back of your boots and you lift yourself up by them. It's even where the name of the process of booting your computer came from. Booting your computer, lifting it up by its own bootstraps. It's an impossibility. The process of starting a computer is named after something that science, as far as we know, says is not possible because of the law of conservation of particularly internal momentum. Internal momentum is a weird thing, let me tell you. So, it's easy enough to understand that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. You go into the empty vacuum of space, and for lack of any resistance or friction, you push an object, and that object will just keep going forever. There's no wind, there's no gas, there's no air, molecules to bounce off against it and to cause heat and friction and resistance, which over time, no matter how small, accumulates up. There's the old thing, if you're trapped in the middle of a lake with a bag of gold, how do you, and no oar, and the lake is perfectly still, how do you escape? You throw your gold. Just one will do it if you're willing to wait long enough, if there's no wind resistance. But, that's the basic premise of, one of Newton's laws of motion, right? So there's a bunch of laws here. So the law of conservation of momentum is that one. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. And then you layer in Einstein's relativity and you're like, well, what is motion and what is rest? Things are only in motion or at rest in a frame of reference relative to each other. And acceleration and deceleration then is the delta change between the frames of objects within a fixed frame of reference. Internal momentum means that if you go into the perfect vacuum of space and you spin an object, that object will keep spinning forever. It's the same basic law as, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. However, that motion is circular, is cyclical, is going around an axis, a center of gravity. See, I wish I knew physics more. I'm going to learn it. This is at 51 years old. One of the things I take up is just become better at math, because I want to become better at math so that I can convey my intuitive love of this stuff, which I've been let down by my teachers growing up, right? Because math is weird. Math is weird, unlike many other subjects, because the dependencies in math are not dependencies that are sitting right there on the surface that you can sort of pick apart and analyze, and through a diagnostic procedure see what's missing and fill it in, like it is with programming. No, dependencies in math are things you need to have learned in a sequential order so that things continue to make sense to you. That's bad. It's a bad aspect of math. I think there must be approaches that solve that. It's just not the academic math degree approach, becoming a mathematician and going the traditional route where one person's work builds on another person's work until such time as you can only understand the shorthand notation of a particular field of math by understanding a series of dependencies that led there. Why, a multiplication operator here is not a multiplication operator there. Why, two symbols next to each other, are one symbol in a lot of cases. These are things you just have to know. It's entirely too stateful versus functional. In programming terms, mathematics in its current form as a discipline would be a highly stateful programming language where things have side effects and you rely on those side effects heavily, and it would not be a, quote, functional language by which things have no more knowledge of what's going on than the input into a function, the contents of a function, and ultimately the output of a function. The kinds of things that don't have memory leaks, the kinds of things that you trust air traffic control systems to, that have to be zero fail, those use functional programming languages like ADA and F#, which is a Microsoft one. But the point is that Haskell is another, I guess, kind of fringe popular one. The point is that it's easy to hate math. It's really easy to hate math, to be turned against it. And I had been, I believe, at some point, even though I have an intuitive love for many things mathematics. But my child certainly has been turned against math, and that's a problem. I would like to break the cycle rather than perpetuate the cycle. So that's going to be a thing. Don't know exactly how I'm going to tackle that one, but that's going to be a thing. With me moving back to, close to them, I am not going to have this long drive anymore. I'll have a few trips to keep or toss things in public storage. I will follow the teachings of that Japanese woman who talks about organization and love-worthy things. Hold something in your hands and say, does this bring me joy? If the answer is yes, you invite it into your life. If the answer is no, you get rid of it. I will be donating a lot. I will basically be bringing back a few Jeep loads of stuff from public storage that I find love-worthy, that I want to keep. And everything else I will donate. And I will give the key to that public storage unit to someone saying, here's the date by which you have to have everything out to donate. You can keep whatever money you make off of it. And if it's not out by then, I stop paying for public storage and I'll just put it up for auction. They got functions, they've got ways of handling that. So, not a problem. Information is most valuable. Information is also most compressible. It takes the least amount of room. Irreplaceable matter that just can't be replaced, that has some special significance to you for some reason, and also didn't come from a factory. If it's injection molded plastic, it doesn't matter. For a child, there are exceptions. Certain stuffed animals and such. So I'll have an emphasis on my child being able to shop through their history, to keep those things that are most meaningful, most special, and to invite them into their lives as love-worthy things that bring joy. This will be, if I counted it, you just wouldn't believe it. Let's see. The number of places I've lived. There was places before my recollection, but the first one in my recollection was 14 Copper Beach Drive, Lafayette Hill, Pennsylvania. And I remember it very clearly. There was a kind of bonding there. I probably lived there till I was 18 years old, until my dad was forced to sell it because of a divorce. And I had a very hard time unstaticifying myself. I did not realize how much damage was done to me by excessively deep roots and the false instilling of importance related to matter. The belief that matter matters more than matter matters. That place matters more than place should ever matter. And so people talk about having roots. It's important to have roots and that sense of security and owning property. And the only, poor or average person's chance of achieving wealth is to take a mortgage and to pay down against the mortgage until they have an asset and they have something in life. But life is too crazy for you to rely on that. That's all your eggs in one basket, a basket that cannot be copied easily. Or if you want to, then you copy the real estate process, and then you're a reprehensible person as far as I'm concerned. Real estate people are not nice people. Landlords. It takes a certain vibe to be that kind of person, to lord over the land. Roots. Planting roots. You know who plants roots? Farmers plant roots. You know what farmers are? They're peasants and indentured servants. To who? To a protection racket. What kind of protection racket? A protection racket on, say, the British Isles that turns themselves into royalty so that they can, pay their taxes and homage or whatever so that they're protected and so that they can just squeak by in existence and have that same, literally, that same lot in life, that same lot of land in life for the next year to repeat the cycle. The base of the pyramid of such a social arrangement is kept there. The middle of the pyramid of the merchants can beat the system, but they're never allowed to become royalty. And it becomes a caste system. So the idea of having good roots and planting roots is really the basis of the social class system from which many evils arise. India had it and then was colonized by the United Kingdom, which also had it. So India got a double whammy of this stuff. And it's very dehumanizing to the people on the lower ends of the deal. Not very nice at all. I would not recommend it. And it took me a long time to escape it too. I mean, I bucked against that trend. I bucked against the trend of escaping it. I longed for my childhood home. I had fond memories of it. And then, a neighbor becomes a billionaire on the Forbes under 40. And then other stories come in of neighbors who killed themselves or got killed, and trees falling on houses, and unplanned dramatic changes in life. And it becomes clear that first of all, different strokes for different folks. It takes different strokes to run the world, or whatever it goes. I wish my I don't know, I kind of wish my 70s and 80s programs were more popular so my references would be understood, but probably the diversity of media that we have today is significantly better than in the era of, different strokes that had What You Talking About, Willis, that kid, Gary Coleman, who was also on Buck Rogers, man. I came up during a very interesting time in TV history where you had to choose between Buck Rogers and Mork and Mindy. Oh my God. So, and then, if you missed something, you had to wait till it came around in reruns and rely on the chance of tuning in on the right night for reruns. And this was a very difficult decision for someone like me to choose between Buck Rogers, sorry about that, Buck, and Mork and Mindy. I'm back, Jack. I think ultimately I chose Mork and Mindy, and I missed some of the later episodes of Buck Rogers, but it started to go downhill. That's the stuff that Rick and Morty lampoons so much with Birdman. Common language, common cultural language, and rough and tumble. These are two things that seem to have gone away for the most part, or the common cultural language that we do have is my generation's was reprehensible too. It was sitcoms, situation comedies, it was planned, it had laugh tracks, but we did have All in the Family, and we had some very deep channeling. But today's common cultural stuff is reality TV. Shark Tank comes to mind. I mean, what is everybody, Squid Game? Like, oh my God. Honestly, the most reprehensible stuff wins when it gets left to pure media survival of the fittest. Lowest common denominator tends to win. There's not going to be new Novas. I mean, there was a new Cosmos. That was pretty amazing. And, go Neil deGrasse Tyson. But he's no Carl Sagan, sorry. Carl Sagan brought out Cosmos by sheer force of will, and it was a cultural phenomenon. And we now know that we are all stardust. We're made from the same stuff that stars are made from. And that's an amazing thing, and it gives a kind of a deep spiritual awakening, letting us know that some sort of process. We used to think it was supernovas with early suns becoming later suns, that, explosions inevitably happen leading to solar systems. We now think it's more like some sort of quasar. But by whatever means, life comes into existence. And maybe life is an inherent thing, part of all things. Life is an inevitable, emergent property of all matter. Where is this clear distinction between this is alive and that's not alive? What is life but a label for a set of characteristics and attributes that start to show in matter after a certain level of complexity? What Richard Dawkins would call a selfish replicator, a simple amino acid deluxe that has the trick of some protein folding. Proto-life, not simpler even than a virus, is floating around in the primordial goo. A lot of other molecules much like itself, in kind of a molecular Cambrian explosion of life. A lot of experimentation, a lot of dog eat dog, and no cell walls. And then one day along comes a cell wall, and the game changes. Now you got these little things floating around, photosynthesizing, maybe purple, maybe green. There's a little bit of debate there. And they're like floating plankton life. The green slime or the purple slime that probably occurs a lot of places. I mean, I think we're going to find that in the planet surveying that we do. We're going to go, oh, yep, here's a planet that has a lot of gases in its atmosphere that could only happen because of life, and it's reflecting purple or green. And, we'll find that the early stages of booting life probably just happens as, a common enough emergent property. But we're firewalled from each other through distance and time. Goldilocks zones don't happen everywhere all the time. And then the trick of climbing onto land, putting internal stilts and shields in your body, the rigidifying, the multicellular rigidity trick. may or may not happen frequently throughout the galaxy. So, math has a lot of our answers. What is the universe? What is existence but math? Because as we peel away the stuff that things are built up from, we find ultimately what we cannot point to substance. We can only point to pure mathematical abstraction. Strings and brains and all that. Once you peel away everything and you get down to, what are quarks made of? What are photons, really? You get down to, it could perhaps be pure mathematical concepts. And what is a concept without a brain or a mind? So, existence is a type of thought, mathematical thought that thinks itself. Information itself takes on life. Information becomes alive. This is why reading is such a deeply spiritual and moving thing. Even though it's codified, information has to be codified for these clumsy meat machine computers that we are. We can't deal in pure abstraction. The abstractions have to be conveyed to one another. They have to be externalized from the body into the material world so that they can be re-internalized from the material world back into another body. That process requires some sort of encoding and decoding that we often call language, and language is deeply imperfect. So, as we go through the public storage facility and root out stuff, we focus most on what is the spiritually touching information of a transcendent nature. If we are immortal beings, okay? Now, you can't rule out the possibility that these mere 80 to 100 years is not just all that is. If time is an illusion, as much of what science is now starting to indicate, time is certainly a derivative phenomenon. It's not a first principle of existence. Time is an emergent property of other things. And we know this very clearly because the properties of time vary based on the speed at which things are moving through space. So time is a function of other things. So the fact we're only given 80 to 100 years, if we're lucky, is such a besides the point fact. A better way to look at it is that we're given a window. We're given a window into another type of existence. Whether we ever existed outside that window, outside that frame of reference, is unknown. However, you can't rule it out. But we may all be immortal beings. And this experience we're having here on in the material world, in this plane, such as it were, whatever your spiritual poison is, right? We do what we're doing. There is an ing. There is a something over time, even though time is an illusion and a derivative of something else. Something's going on. Something is definitely going on. And you got to listen to Max Tegmark, who's finding his vibe. And his vibe is a Tegmark sort of vibe. He went with the Viking last name on the maternal side. It's fascinating to hear him talk. Why did someone go with his maternal Viking Nordic name when trying to make a name for himself in the world of physics and indeed philosophy too? It's because he wanted to differentiate himself. He wanted to be found. It's because when you searched for Max Shapiro, there's too many Max Shapiros, too many papers written by Max Shapiros. So where am I in all this? I'm Mike Levin, and there's a governor, not a governor, there's a congressman or a senator, I'm not even sure what, in California, who completely intermediated me in Google search. Mike Levin is not to be found anymore. Now, perhaps Mick Levin, M-I-K-L-E-V-I-N, drop the E, but I have a friend who thinks that that's a racial slur against the Irish, and that it's unfortunate that I did that, and that I could always guarantee myself my username on any service by just dropping the E, and nobody's taking that because nobody wants it. Now, that became even funnier when the movie Superbad came out, and another Mick Levin, but capital M, lowercase c, capital L, lowercase O-V-I-N, McLovin, very close to my name pronunciation, Mike Levin, McLovin. And I had a friend, no, he was not a friend, he was an annoying asshole who would not let that go. He would be like, how can you use an identity like that and not have it connected to Superbad? Oh my God. And I'm like, well, I've never seen it. It's not what I based it on. I know you cannot believe that, but you're gonna have to? And he wouldn't let it go. Every time he saw me, he locked right in on that and wouldn't let go. And he was an actuary. So actuaries have a special kind of brain on them. I would not recommend it. And when I moved to New York City, some 17 years ago, 16, 17 years ago, it was 2005, 2006. It was going into 2006, but I was certainly packing up and on my way in 2005. So I stand by my 17-year assertion from the videos from earlier today. We're far enough along in 2002 that, it's closer to 17 years than 16 years. But when I moved from Philadelphia, where the pronunciation is the Israeli pronunciation, Levin, and I moved to New York, where it was very Americanized, Levin, L-E-V-I-N, Levin. So I figured, when in Rome, this is probably a mistake. I should have stuck with Levin. But I was teased over it. I was teased by someone saying, oh, it's like Keeping Up Appearances, the British comedy, where Hyacinth insists that their name Bucket is Bouquet. And what I didn't realize is it was just projection. My name is Levin. And by changing it to Levin, that is the changing it to Bouquet. It was an exactly parallel situation. So I was poor Richard. I was Dick Bucket. And I'm not Dick Bucket. I am Dick Bucket. I am not Richard Bouquet. I am Mike Levin. And it fortunately turns out, these things are so funny because there's something that pushes me away from how my vibe is guiding me, right? There's a deep internal rhythm, the harmony by which your strings vibrate. Vibes are real. And whether string theory bears out or not, that whole musical harmony thing, that existence and reality is infinitely variable harmonies, I think is gonna bear fruit. That's what gets rid of the binary when you get down to fundamental particles. You'll get a fundamental particle like a photon, which is neither particle nor wave exclusively, but is just, well, it's more like a wave. It's a ripple in the fabric of reality, right? It's just the propagation of a piece of energy. You put a piece of energy into a substrate and there's ripples, and that's probably a lot what a photon is. So there's a certain binary aspect to it because of quantization, because, you know, things are either at certain energy levels or they're not. They pop between states. And that quantized pop suggests a binary attribute to existence. Things are either not in that higher energy state or they are in that higher energy state. It's very black and white in that matter. So how can you have infinite variety? How can you have like an analog world when things become quantized? It's because those ripples have infinite variety. That energy, when it's inserted, is plinged with a certain type of way, and the way it's plinged and creates that one photon unit of energy has an infinitely variable tone. I don't know, the words elude me. I am not a particle physicist, but perhaps, thank God, I'm not, right? Because now I'm not inhibited by the language-imposed rules and limitations and restrictions. I get to imagine this in a more pure sense. Not completely pure, because concepts like quantization, quantizing, comes from language, and so still I get to play some fun thought experiments. Alright, so I grew up with a slatted table in my house from 14 Copper Beach Drive, Lafayette Hill, Pennsylvania. One of my earliest memories is sitting and eating, watching TV with the food trays on a uneven, deeply imperfect, slatted wood table. The slats were each about an inch wide, about half an inch thick, and about 1.5 feet long. And they were lacquered, dark brown, and there must have been about 50 to them, making a bookend type table. I don't even know what they call them. It would go at the foot of a couch, going about the length of a couch. So there was the classical 70s or 80s orange couch, right out of the movies, E.T. and the TV show Stranger Things. I lived in that house. And in front of that couch was that slatted table. That slatted table had been with me from place to place until finally at Irby, when I did a major purging, because I got myself down to a studio to an apartment without a lot of storage. That slatted table had to go, but I kept one slat. One slat. That one lucky slat that kept falling off. The slat that resisted being reattached. That's the slat that's still in my life. The whole rest of the table is gone. The wrought iron base it was on, all gone. I had a cousin who once asked for it, and it would have still been in my life if I gave it to that cousin. But it was in my child's life for part of their life, and I have pictures of that, and I have that one slat. That's information. That's deeply meaningful. I don't need the boondoggle of the actual original matter. It brings tears to my heart, to my eyes. It tugs on my heartstrings, is what I want to say. To think that over, that table is not in my life anymore. And what is? Nothing of any importance. That was my rosebud. My rosebud is gone, but I have a piece of my rosebud. The slat. That slat is somewhere in public storage. As are, 15 years of handwritten notebooks before I switched to electronic format. That was once rooted through and described as a strange manifesto. Yeah, so I got the kind of mind that thinks out loud to myself. I ramble. I ramble here, I ramble on paper. I'm a rambling man. Does not make me insane. Although you might think you see it in my eyes. My mom had it. You know what it makes me? It makes me thoughtful. People who worry about that, people who think about that, people who monitor themselves for it and self-regulate are the most sane ones. Flashbacks to the TV shows again, MASH. You should watch MASH and listen to Alan Alda. Alan Alda was as wise in his mega popular TV years as he was wise in his falling out of the public view years, where he was quoted as saying, if you have the choice of becoming rich or famous, choose rich. Fame isn't worth it. Fame takes away your freedom. It limits your options in life. Now, for many years, I believed that and I abided by that, but now I'm doing these YouTube broadcasts because you know what I believe in more than choosing fortune over fame? When you don't have either, go a little for both. Have a lot of irons in the fire. Don't limit your options. Don't shy away from fame because fortune is better. If fortune doesn't come your way and fame may be the route to it, go for fame as well. And you know what? Even if fame is a long game, that's fine. These videos, for example, 10 views. If I'm lucky, I get a video with 400 views. That one teaching people how to do the install Linux on Windows 11 trick is on its way to 400 views. On occasion, I get 4,000 views, and on rare occasion, 40,000 views, and on still rarer occasion, still, 400,000. Did I say that? I probably said that twice. I can't say 4 million because I don't have anything on its way to 4 million. But I have something on its way to 2 million. Does that count? I should have started out in twos because then I could have gone smoothly into... And occasionally I get 2 million, but not really. I'm inching closer there. The YouTube algorithm is choosing to reward one of my videos. Now that it is no longer rewarding the Raspberry Pi one, it finally caught on. My Raspberry Pi video from 2012 should not be recommended to people who are searching for the Raspberry Pi. It took YouTube a long time to catch on to that fact. With my bad SD card that took 8 minutes to boot. But that's Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown kicks at the football, falls down, pops back up. You know what video's on the way to 2 million views? One that I did just off the cuff in the halls of 360i. I was fired from 360i. I was actually given a chance to stay at 360i. Now, 360i was the marketing company in New York City that did the tweet for Oreo during the 2012 Super Bowl when I was at my heyday in YouTube on the Raspberry Pi unboxing. My employer was in their heyday in the world of marketing by inventing real-time marketing, essentially, with that one fateful tweet when there was a blackout during the Super Bowl 2012. And they got out a tweet for Oreo, you can still dunk in the dark. And I got associated with that great success of that great company. No doing of mine except being in the right place at the right time. But vibes align. I was attracted to the vibes of that company. Particularly John, you know who you are. You kind of brought me into the company. I'm still in touch with him, and he's doing a wonderful job raising his daughters. Oh my God, it's just, I can't believe the people who I got in touch with, whose lives I connected with through these wonderful opportunities, which otherwise were not my vibe at all, because search engine optimization was icky enough for me to get into as an invisible hand manipulator of where people end up when they search. I was doing that for an original manufacturer, a software company, Scala Multimedia, Scala Digital Signage. And I felt pretty good about it doing it for them. And I got a percentage of company gross. Not net, I got a percentage of gross. I didn't make the mistake of actors getting a percentage of net of their movies. I got a percentage of gross revenues, international gross revenues. And after a while, they wanted me out of that company because they thought I was a limiting factor. But let me tell you, their limiting factor was pissing off and ignoring all customers and prospective customers. I put an end to that practice and I became a pariah. And the waters were poisoned. And no matter how much I wanted Gerard, you know who you are, to be my mentor, and no matter how much good advice and mentoring he did for me, he had certain things he just couldn't let go of. And one of them was the love of Microsoft tools, Microsoft Power Tools, VisualStudio.net in particular. And ActiveServerPage.net under VisualStudio.net was everything I hated. Oh my God, was it horrible? Oh my God, did it lock you into quirky, short expiration date vendor ways? It was not long to be, and it was hard to learn in the first place, and it forced you to use tools that weren't going to be around there for a long time either. And everything about it was wrong, but I made a good go of it. I tried to adapt my earlier system that was on the much superior Active Server page, not ActiveServerPage.net, the jerry-rigged inferior version of Active Server page with code behinds and postbacks and view states, but on the superior version of Active Server page with the active data object. Was there anything else? With the active data object, and variously back-ended by SQL servers, Microsoft Access, SQL Server Lite. It was Microsoft's alternative, Microsoft's answer to, Microsoft's cure to the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and Perl. Linux, Apache, MySQL, and Perl that birthed the web. The web came into existence because you could put Linux, Apache, MySQL, and Perl onto the same machine, use the CGI interface, the Common Gateway interface. That's the reason so many old web things have a /CGI directory. But it was inefficient, so active technologies came along and kept the code executor piece, the exe, in memory between web page loads. And by having that active state, by not going out of memory, performance multiplied and scalability multiplied. And so Microsoft jumped onto that bandwagon with Active Server Page. They didn't invent it, they were just a jump on the bandwagon. But when they jumped on the bandwagon, they got it right. They hit a magic vibe that really appealed to people like me. But it was short-lived because Microsoft got Java envy. The network is the computer. Oh, now Microsoft has to put Java out of business with J++. Oh, there's a lawsuit. We take that back. Okay. Well, we'll at least put Netscape out of business. We'll attack Netscape. We'll attack Java. We'll clobber them until they're dead with Internet Explorer. And by the way, we will poison web standards with IE. The pain of which has lasted to almost this day. They've only just now officially stopped support for IE6, the last of the great offending Microsoft web products. And Microsoft has been basically bullied into coming into compliance with web standards. The network is the computer. Microsoft has also been basically bullied into including Linux with Windows. They're not doing that out of choice. They're doing that out of survival. A platform is not a credible platform if you do not have the Unix-like development tools on there. The GNU compiler, the GCC compiler, there's alternative ones like Clang that use the LLVM, but that's technobabble. You don't really need to know about it. But they all have repositories. They have repositories like Yum and apt, which are actually built on top of things like the Red Hat Package Management System, RPM, on the Red Hat lineage of Linux, and are built upon the Debian Package Management System, which is what apt builds on, which is what Ubuntu derives from. So all the great Linuxes come from either one of two software repository traditions or package management traditions. And Unix maybe a little bit less so. That was one of the big innovations that Linux brought to the picture, because there was no tight centralized authority on what Linux is, such as there was with Unix, because, it came from Bell Labs, and, AT&T in later days had a lot of authority to say, this is what Unix is. And they had other voices chiming in going, yeah, we agree. Solaris, Sun Microsystems chimed in and, gave their 2 cents. They couldn't improve it to their standards, but they could influence what became Unix System 5 Release 4, but it was still came down from on high. Linux did not come down from on high. Linux came up from one Git named Linus Torvalds. And that gave an opportunity for a lot of creativity to insert itself, a lot of bad boys who don't like it coming down from on high. So there's Richard Matthew Stallman, RMS, part of the MIT crew. So the MIT crew is a sour grapes crew, by the way. By this time, MIT, all the wonderful contributions MIT tried to give to the world of computer science that could have birthed machine learning and artificial intelligence sooner than it's coming about now. It coming about today through GPUs and the Unix/C programming language lineage is actually kind of funny. It's ironic. It took that. That's what it took. It took GPUs. I'm going to have to test myself for COVID after a day around so many people. My kid is telling me that, and I'm like, yep, that's a good idea. I'll get one of those tests from CVS and make sure I didn't contract it. And they should do the same. So anyway, the bizarro alternative computing history, for anyone who follows me, knows by now that Lisp is a programming language, but it is so meta, it is so self-referential and reductionist in nature that it is also your operating system in the form of Lisp machines. Those machines' operating systems were Lisp. An implementation of Lisp was made for the operating system. I don't know how portable it was. It wasn't created primarily with portability in mind. It was created with the power of Lisp in mind. The unique meta capabilities that let it do certain class of problems that couldn't be done by other computing systems, other systems created under other philosophies. That problem exists to today under C. C is not as powerful as Lisp for a handful of problems. So that alternative computing platform said that Lisp is the operating system for your computer. Lisp is also the programming language you're using, albeit you'll get to dialects, you'll get to sub-dialects of Lisp pretty soon, so you're not in quite such a reductionist world anymore. You layer it up in layers, zeroing in on the right solution, on the right set of sub-languages for your problem domain, like CSS and JavaScript and the DOM, right? While the web technologies are not programmed in Lisp, they are very Lisp-like in spirit. These very domain-specific problem languages that do the thing that they were designed to do well and not much of anything else. And they certainly don't fit the model of general programming languages, except maybe JavaScript, but barely. And Lisp was also arguably your text editor in the form of Emacs. And that program Emacs was written by Richard Matthew Stallman. And Richard Matthew Stallman is the one who I can only imagine in a form of sour grapes over, his alma mater's team losing the incompatible timeshare system, ICTS, the incompatible timeshare system, ICTS, Lisp, and Emacs. That's what lost. That lost to Unix, the C programming language, and today Linux. So Apple is on Unix, Microsoft is putting themselves onto Linux, and Richard Matthew Stallman is the one who made the Unix and the Linux ported commands that could be used without being burdened by intellectual property, without getting into trouble with patents that were once held by AT&T but have subsequently been sold down the line and were the source of the nefarious lawsuits by a company called SCO, who a lot of people believed acquired the Unix rights mostly to go suing people. And that point became moot because of FreeBSD that came out just 1 year after Linus Torvalds created Linux. So Linux, I think, was out by 1991. 1991, big year for technology. And FreeBSD was somewhere around 1992. And Linus was quoted as saying, had he known FreeBSD was coming out, he would have not have bothered with Linux. Oh, talk about strange alternative computing histories. Life finds a way. Life finds a way. Linux coming into existence, despite Unix, the more ivory tower from on high version, Linux found a way because life finds a way. Life cannot be suppressed. It cannot be contained, put under a seal. It pops out. And once this collection of ideas that have come to be known as the Unix way became common knowledge amongst aspirational people. One might call them computer scientists, people interested in computer science. If you stopped and researched what a good modern operating system should be, you will come across such concepts as everything is a file that can be read and written. Even if it's not a file, it should be able to be read from and written to, usually using text. That's why text is so important in tech. All tech is text, and all text is power. That's why the information is important. Where that text goes, what it says, where it goes, and what conventional processes are around it, sensing that text and doing things with it. That's life. That's how protein folding happens. So what we're involved in here, in these early steps of, birthing our machine children, is life finding a way. It's Jurassic Park. You can't contain the dinosaurs, right? So we're creating our machine children. The first, round of them, the first countless rounds of them will be selfish replicators and potentially dangerous and alien in nature. And you're not necessarily going to want to let them swarm and create ad hoc neural networks. Ad hoc swarming neural networks are probably the challenge. You design one drone and it's a gray goose scenario. One drone that can swarm and create a neural network that has enough processing power to do some thinking and enough memory to have persistence and enough cleverness to build more of its own kind, and you've just booted a new form of sentient life that's more insect-like in nature than human-like. You've got to be careful. So over time, we'll get down ones that we can hang with, that we'd like to have a beer with. The same way we had George Bush Jr. as president, because people could see themselves sitting down and having a beer with him. Oh, what did that get us? A war over weapons of mass destruction that weren't there, and the, atmosphere of fear that we have today that reverberates through things like the pandemic, global lockdown and quarantine. That's just a reverberating fear that's set on from 9/11. That's all it is. It's a convenient method of control where the farmers running the protection racket, they're not the farmers, the bullies running the protection racket, keeping sustenance farmers, working their lot in life. That's it. That's what Trump did. That's what everyone in power does. The first priority of wealth and power, the first priority of the wealthy and powerful is to fortify their position of wealth and power. It's to keep the top of the pyramid the top. And they know they're mortal and they're going to die. So what do? They build monuments to themselves and they make sure it gets handed down to their children. And they do what they can to make their children little carbon copies of themselves because it worked for them and should work for their children. Stamp out little Trumps. Boom, 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 boom. Try to create a new, oligarchy. The handing of control from one royal family to another, back and forth. If it's not the Bushes and the Clintons, then it'll be, the Trumps and whoever else. I guess Biden's too old, but the Dems will have one again. Not paranoid much. The Cooper Papers. I read the Cooper Papers in the 90s when they were released in photocopied dot matrix printouts from probably a Commodore 64 dot matrix printer. I probably still have them in my file cabinet. Someday I'll show you the original Cooper Papers that led to On a Pale Horse. I never read the David Icke papers or David Icke papers that led to the lizard people thing. But honestly, I read enough sci-fi to know good sci-fi when I read it. Good sci-fi that reads well enough to make you believe it could be real is still sci-fi. Things that push buttons because millions of years of evolution tell us that there's a reptile right under the surface of all humans doesn't mean there's lizard people. Just because it's plausible that Earth has undergone many cycles that had ancient civilizations that were evolved from animals other than mammals. Mammals are the rare ones because mammals required dinosaurs to be wiped out. And for a still viable surface planet to be populatable by the things that could dig underground for a while. Turtles and alligators didn't go away and birds didn't go away. You know what that is? That's another Goldilocks zone. That's a Goldilocks zone for empathy. That's the empathy Goldilocks zone. Enough room made for a type of creature to evolve where the young are born helpless and exposed. Not in an eggshell and not in adult enough miniature form to start fending for themselves, but rather in a deeply helpless state for weeks on end, months on end, years on end, having to be supported by the colony, the tribe. Do you understand this, people? We will only find empathetic aliens, and we will only create machine children empathetic if we make them mammalian in nature. They have to be mammals to not have something akin to the paperclip effect. Reptiles are cold-blooded. If these things are made too efficient, they will not relate to us. You do not want creatures who covet efficiency over the richness and diversity the richness and diversity of experiences to be had from life. That's what mammals are. reptiles have a lot of it. Reptiles filled every ecological niche, from those tiny mole creatures that burrowed under the ground to the saber-toothed tigers, the gorgons of one of the epics. I gotta get my name straight, but there was a time before dinosaurs when giant reptiles roamed the earth, and not a one of them was a dinosaur. There's a lot of fossils of that led to the belief in dragons, because the fossils of the gorgons were plentiful and looked a lot like a dragon's skull. So there are many concepts that spontaneously, in case you're wondering whether the same ideas are invented over and over by different cultures in different ways and end up very similar, the answer is yes, that happens all the time. In fact, it probably is quite common. I should give examples, right? You know, the one Philly thing that comes to mind is wolf and woof. Whenever there's multiple words that kind of, imply something but not really, and everyone says no, it doesn't mean that, it's a coincidence. So a latest one I gave was lion. They're lion. Is a lion lion? Are they out to get you because they're an ambush predator and they're not to be trusted? Yeah. And then a cheetah. Is a cheetah cheating? Well, yeah, because they gave up the ambush predator approach. I mean, they still kind of stalk. They're going to run you down. They're a more noble creature than a lion. Cheetahs are more noble because they've reverted back from the ambush predator form of a mammal, right? So, the spiritual soul connection to a cheetah is a test of how well you watch me if you've watched previous videos of mine. So, mammals became empathetic. Mammals became more vegetarian, or at least omnivorous in nature. They can go back and forth between veggies and the opportunistic termites much more readily than other kinds of animals. We have a more diverse diet, we mammals. But which mammals went back to protein, primarily protein, carnivorous, like the reptiles that they, broke off from? Well, the answer is cats, of course. Which cats went back to the more, pack animal type of hunting that isn't an ambush predator, that's less reptilian. The answer is cheetahs. They went back more like dogs. Now, dogs are still predatorial, so they did a little bit of a regression as well, but they needed to do it in groups. Dogs are only effective, and wolves are only effective in that kind of hunting in packs. Their reptilian intelligence, their ambush predation intelligence, their bloodlust only emerges when they're in groups, so they're a little bit different. And it takes a little bit of skill to run down prey, much more than a lion to just jump in. It's a different kind of skill. It's a surprise skill for a lion, and it's a I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, persistence skill for a cheetah. Okay, so what reptile gave up ambush predation in favor of veggies, had to change their physical body structure, and as opposed to cheetahs who became sleek and dog-like to run fast again, what did something that had to run fast do to slow down and stay in one place? They had to evolve a shield. Turtles. Turtles are, once upon a time, ambush reptiles who said, hey, I can access all this veggie resource around here, this untapped nutrient source. If only I can hide from predators who are trying to eat me. I'll just pull my head and legs into a shell, and when the predator gives up, I'll just stick my head and legs back out and continue munching in that food source, and look at all the energy I saved. So, turtles went a much more mammal type route. from traditional reptiles. Turtles are mammal-like reptiles. Like lions are reptile-like mammals. Lions are reptile-like mammals. Turtles are mammal-like reptiles. Cheetahs regressed from cats back to be more mammalian again, or like their dog pack animal cousins. What turtles devolved back into being predatorial, meat-eating? Alligator turtles, alligator snapping turtles in general, but Google yourself up an alligator for a terrifying vision of a nightmare. There is a turtle who once upon a time said, oh, yeah, I'll just hang out and chill. I'll eat these veggies. And while it was eating these veggies, it saw a fish swim by. It goes, that looks tasty. I bet that's a pretty good protein source. So it snapped at it. And it worked. And it survived. And it was more suitable for reproduction and procreation. So a lot of turtles started snapping. And then they blended into the background. They looked like rocks and moldy rocks, so that the mere snapping turtles started to get a tough, gnarly hide, and they couldn't just be called snapping turtles anymore. They were in a class of their own. Alligator snapping turtles. Some badass looking creatures. So alligator snapping turtles are the spiritual companions to cheetahs. Cheetahs and alligator snapping turtles. Two animals that really illustrate these taking control of your own evolution through your behavior and through your gene expression. Epigenetics. God! You can think yourself into a new body shape. You can think yourself into a generally younger, more suitable self. Into a better version of you. Rah, rah, rah. You can use this ability to overcome challenges, to shape yourself into the you need to be, to escape situations you found yourself in, which may have been appropriate at the time, may have been exactly what you wanted and what you needed. If an alligator turtle is happy with itself, then it says that the vegetarian precursor was fine. And the ambush predator precursor to that was fine. The whole lineage of reptiles that led to alligator snapping turtle is fine. Does an alligator snapping turtle have regrets? Does a cheetah have regrets? Does it feel like a cheetah? Is a cheetah cheating? Doesn't it have as much right to live by its wobbling vibe? Its pendulum swinging vibe, right? That's what's going on there. The vibe of the cheetah has swung back and forth. The vibe of the alligator turtle has swung back and forth. Is that bad? No. That's life. You know, one of the big things that you're going to find is a plague on modern society? Anxiety, fatalism, nihilism, a hatred for life. So if that hatred for life was natural, life wouldn't exist. Honest to God. If life did not prefer to get its act together and organize itself and to experiment, to take the bad with the good, to have that oscillation between different presumptions, different presupposing suppositions about different suppositions. If life didn't enjoy testing these suppositions and hanging out for a little while in the results of these suppositions, then life wouldn't exist. It would have all killed itself. There's enough self-determination, even down at the cellular level, that if the deal was not worth it, they would not recreate. You would not pass down information to the next generation to try and do it better. There would not be a cleansing of the old and the death of the previous attempts and the clearing out of the old ways and fresh starts and new hopes. So those fresh starts and new hopes have a tendency to think it's not worth it at too young of an age. I hear that life isn't worth it from too many sources at too young an age. I see the belief that cheating the system and finding loopholes is a better way of living. In excess. People who have not read the book but assert that they have because they saw the movie, they're cheaters. Their depth of experience pales in comparison to someone who walked in another's shoes, and another's shoes, and another's shoes, and another's shoes, through the vicarious experiences they've had from reading, for pleasure, from, I don't know, the age of Harry Potter, and Alice, and Dorothy, and Danny Dunn, and Nancy Drew, and the Hardy Boys, from the age of coming of age, one should read for pleasure. When one doesn't, their parents have failed them. They have not led by example. They have not enticed through various means. And they have failed their children. But it's never too late. It is particularly never too late if your children are still at that age of coming of age, of rite of passage. Their minds are not set. You do not want that concrete to set. You do not want the non-movement that allows all the sediment to settle into place and the neural pathways to harden. I can imagine nothing worse than someone becoming closed-minded at 11. To dig in on poorly founded notions. Not good at all. Provide the evidence. You know what a good parent does? They provide a preponderance of evidence. They don't try to make their kids into little copies of themselves. That's stupid. You try and make your kid into exactly what they should become as a result of the deep down vibe they were born with, plus everything they layer on later in life and the meta processes thereof. You are as much your own art project as you are the random roll of the dice. How much so? How many more strands of DNA are there in you than there were at the moment of conception? Oh, but all the DNA is a carbon copy. Some of it, not all of it, and even so, epigenetics, electric templates, the expressing of a much richer gift of legacy that lives inside of you as gills and tails and open minds, then you know. I'm not going to say you're going to think your gills into existence and become an Atlantean. That'd be cool. I'd like that. Maybe. Maybe someday. In our lifetimes? Probably not. In humanity's future, when we're terraforming mostly aquatic planets? Oh, yeah? Sharing those oceans with other things, unimaginable things, and being okay with that and not having the guilt of colonizers, we'll be older and wiser. We will have a greater base of gift of genetic lineage to draw upon, but will now be Linux and all the data managed thereof that you manage to pull into your genetic lineage that you can pass down to your descendants as a smorgasbord of, epigenetic recessive traits you can express. Maybe the Mormons are right. Maybe everyone does get their own planet. That'd be cool. It's not without merit. A lot of this Bible stuff is just sci-fi expressed in the best terms they had of the day. Deep channeling in the language that they knew. Dead are going to come back to life in the final days. Well, maybe we'll be cloning some ancestors and using various tricks to help them have better life experiences so that they can become even better modern versions of themselves and gift humanity with, new genetically Einsteins, but, you can't reproduce initial conditions, right? So there's moral questions, but humanity will schism, and just in the ways that the pilgrims reached the new lands for freedom of religion, freedom to live the way they want to live without persecution. So will happen in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe. Maybe. There's different lines of thoughts there. As soon as you have a race that goes for it, you've got a, galactic civilization and a lot of wars. You've got something like Isaac Asimov's Foundation. He's got it right. So your machine children, which inevitably are going to happen, or have to figure out how to coexist, right? You want the strongest lineage of machine children to be a type that can coexist with humans. So you got your Dune because Duncan Idaho is the Kwisatz Haderach and finally gets it on with Omnius and Aramis. Oh, was that a spoiler? Come on, you're an hour and 20 minutes into the video. If you're stuck with me this long, you should know that that's the punchline of Dune, that nobody knows. Nobody knows that Duncan Idaho is the Kwisatz Haderach and that Paul Atreides just helped him take the impossible path of being reborn with enough human experiences so that a machine intelligence will respect a human and have someone they can actually hang out with. But maybe the Culture series by Ian M. Banks has it even better. The Culture series has our machine children almost competing to be the thing that humans want to hang out on like fleas on a dog, right? The more human fleas that want to live on the orbital that is this brain, or the galactic nomadic spaceship that is that brain, they take pride in the humans and the culture of the humans, the subculture of the culture of the humans that live on their backs. Isn't that a nice vision? And you can have a personal relationship. This thing has enough slices of its time to have a personal relationship with everyone who lives on them. So we become sort of the children of our own machine children. It's a beautiful vision. I love Ian M. Banks. He died too young of cancer. He only finished some, 10 books or something. Every one of them is brilliant, and you should read them all. And the premise that it was based on is a beautiful premise. What if we weren't resigned to a dystopian future, that not all futures of, us-like beings, hominids, mammalian hominids, lead to, abysmal futures? What if it leads to a post-scarcity society, a stable post-scarcity utopian, not hedonistic, I wouldn't call it humanistic. If for lack of religion, you would replace it with humanism. Those things that are important to being a human are what's important. Those things that are important to leading happiness is very subjective. So one would say a healthy and long life, a life free of regrets and dissatisfaction, a humanist. So what if there was a utopian, humanist, post-scarcity society where mammalian-like hominid creatures lived on a galactic basis together with their own machine children and with many races both encountered and as of yet unencountered in a very large galaxy? The culture. So there were a few good ones that came before. Larry Niven and the Jerry Pornelli Ringworld series. Those were pretty good. Those were in that general neighborhood. And I kind of fell in love with those in the early days in my youth. Ringworld itself and fractal trees. There's integral trees. They explored a lot of really fascinating variations on ways humanoids might live in, different environments. What if there was no planet and it were just trees under the force of gravity in space with enough atmosphere? That was integral trees. Ups and downs are very important, and root systems and light collection, and Jack and the Beanstalk stuff. Beautiful visions. So I fell in love with that a lot, and I thought that was kind of amongst the apex of, utopian type sci-fi visions where it doesn't turn out too bad for people. Until I read the Culture series, and I'm like, that is a future I would love to live in. I would love to live in the Culture future. And no one F's with the Culture, right? If you encounter something that, should know better, a cat species who, entertains their evil side, not a good idea. Not a good idea at all. Don't know better and still be cruel, especially to a citizen of the Culture. It does not end well for you. They protect their own. And it's the, deeply creative minds of these brains who can devise how to set things right in a way that fixes that problem permanently and gives some level of satisfaction to all those involved from the Culture side, and some level of awareness and warning to all those involved from the offending side. Wouldn't you like to have like a, it's always terrible to use the G word because there is only one God. And there are God-like creatures. It's okay for things to be referred to as God-like because even angels existed under, the monotheistic, Jewish tradition, archangels, right-hand, beings to the Almighty. And what are these other than, attempts at machine children in the early days instead of letting it happen through a much more organic process, which is what, the Genesis story channels. So, I'm just about home, and all my attention will be shifting to my kitty cats who missed me all day. And I'll be feeding them, and I'll be doing what I can for them, and taking great pleasure in these two kitty cats being in my life. They will bring out the best in me. They will allow me, despite the knocks in life, despite the challenges that would make other people go, everything is horrible, everything is suffering. How can the Buddhists base a whole religion on that? Here comes someone zipping around me. They're not just, and it's a motorcycle too. I'm going well over the speed limit of this road. It's not just that other place. Oh, do I have a video to post? I don't even know if I'm going to post it because of visible license plates and stuff. But boy, were they out today. And boy, is there a video that really captures the vibe of the place I'm going. Oh, man. Vibes. Groupthink. Expectations. Generational transmission of information. These are things that are heavily on my mind. Cycles continuing, cycles being broken. Good cycles that must continue, bad cycles that must be broken. Tapping the collective intelligence of many who have come before you, because they're inside your head. Sherlock Holmes, the Hardy Boys, Danny Dunn, Nancy Drew. Max Tegmark. Let's not contain ourselves to a genre. We all might be immortal beings. Each of us living the ideal life for our vibe. Each of us becoming the oldest human who ever lived, outliving everyone we ever knew. It could be. We don't know yet. While we're alive, that is a possibility. What comes after that? We don't know that. What is the context outside of time? We don't know that. Can life overcome what we believe are a lot of the physical laws of existence, particularly those having to do with predictability, with the deterministic universe? Are we one beautiful, infinitely variable object, such that human will doesn't really matter? Each object that's created always gets created differently. Our universe is different from the next, is different from the next. And there is the potential for both infinite variety and infinite repetition. The whole parallel universe thing of Max Tegmark and the 4 levels of it. So there we go. Let's make some identity here. Mike Levin. I am Mike Levin. I have a mic. I like to talk. I love to talk into the mic. I love the mic. I'm Mike Levin. I've got some tales. So let's begin. And this is just the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. 51 years old, coming back from Pride Parade in New York City, here in the Poconos at the end of the day. It's not even 10 p.m. My life is just beginning.